Amen. I'm in full agreement with that sermon. That was a good reminder on idolatry. I was thinking of the verse that says, the very last verse of 1 John chapter 5, the Bible tells us what we're to do with idols. It says, little children, keep yourselves from idols. And I was going to share something else, but I'll tell you that the sermon that I just heard, it really did get me thinking. All of these things that we hear, there's so much between, I think of my email inbox that I get with the word of the week, and then we have the daily Bible reading plan, and we have 36 months worth of books from Brother Zach. And there's so much that has been given, all the sermons that we hear. And, one of the idols that I can see, even for myself, for those of us who were just so desperately looking for fellowship after so many years of not having, maybe some of us have fellowship because it fell into our laps, I don't know, but for those of us who just really wanted fellowship, that could be an idol. And fellowship has its place. That we know it's of the Lord. I'm so thankful after this last week. I was down in Dallas, and I'm thankful for the promise that the Lord gave to us. We read it a few different times. One of them in Mark chapter 10, verse 30, when it says that there's not any one of us who, if we've left father, mother, lands, brothers, sisters, he says there's not any one of us that in this life will not receive all of that 100-fold. And it was such a joy for me and my family this last week to be down in Dallas and to enjoy the fellowship with other brothers and sisters. But I see that could even be an idol. As we heard this morning, anything but Jesus. And I was thinking of this passage. I'll be brief here this morning. I was thinking of this passage in Luke chapter 12. We could just look at this just very briefly. When Jesus gives the parable and he is talking about the faithful and wise steward, Luke chapter 12, verse 42, he says, "Who then is that faithful and wise steward whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household to give them their portion of meat in due season?" And he says, "Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find so doing." Not enjoying, not if the Lord finds us enjoying being at River of Life. That was one of the things that Santosh had mentioned this morning, is the people who, you can make River of Life, CFC, you can make all these things an idol. And he's not saying the people who enjoy being at River of Life. That's not who is that faithful and wise steward. And then if you read on further down, one of the things, if I thought about this as we were listening this morning, if we really believe that there's this, all this truth that we hear at RLCF, and maybe we listen to, the CFC Bible study app, we listen to fundamental basic truths and verse by, all the things that are available to us. If we really believe that there's this much truth, then there's a very, very, very serious danger for every one of us listening to all of this truth that we hear. And it's dangerous only if we are this guy here, what it says here in verse 45. It says, and if that servant says in his heart, my Lord delays his coming. And it's that servant that is that lazy servant, like, I'm filled now. It's kind of gluttony with messages and gluttony with truth. I'm good. I made it to River of Life. I listened to the word of the week. That's fine. It's a lot more than the people at this church down the road. They just go to satisfy themselves on Sunday for one quick, 25-minute message. But I listen to a word of the week. I listen to the daily devotional. I do all of this. And it's really a way to be lazy. But he says here about in the next verse 46, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looks not for him, and at an hour when he is not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint his portion with the unbelievers. And there's another, the parallel passage says, with the hypocrites. So hypocrites, unbelievers. He says this is where your portion is, where with them. And that servant, verse 47, which knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. And so if you think of yourself in this category of, we have all this truth, we have all these messages, but it's become an idol, it's very, very dangerous. I'll tell you what we just heard. I hope that you all take this seriously. Verse 48, but he that knew not, this is a different group of people now, but he that knew not, so we might say, okay, the people who are not in CFC, they don't know the new covenant, they don't know these things. And they did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. So both groups are beaten. But you say, well, I get all of this, and you think you're doing something with it, but you're just getting gluttonous off of all these messages. But then the next guy, you kind of look down on him because he's not at RLCF, he's at another church or part of another fellowship, and, well, they don't know better. We do, they don't. Both groups are beaten, but look at the one that was beaten worse. It says the guy that knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself. And then he finishes verse 48, for unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall much be required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. It's a very serious thing that we heard today about idolatry. And even as we hear this message that's been given to us, that has been committed to us, the Lord is asking of us, what are we going to do with this message? And it's a danger, even the message that we heard, to say, okay, well, I heard this message, now I know what to do, not to have this idol. May the Lord help us. Amen.
Thank you, brothers, for what you shared. I want to share from Ephesians 6. Finally, be strong in the Lord, in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God, so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of the wickedness in the heavenly places. When I was a kid, I always used to imagine that the fight in the heavenlies between angels and demons, and fighting with swords. But the real fight is there. The demons, they want to get our souls, and souls of our children, and there's a fight going on, and especially somebody who loves the Lord and who wants to be a blessing and who wants to follow the Lord all the days of his life. The devil is after them, and like we hear in this church, the devil is powerless. The devil is in Hebrews 2:14. Therefore, since the children share in this flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that though through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil, that we might be freed. Those who fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. Devil is powerless, but he has his schemes, like we read here in Ephesians 6, the schemes of the devil. And in Numbers chapter 22 to 24, and this is something the Lord has been speaking to me through this week. Numbers 22 to 24, we know about how the Israelites, Balak doesn't like the Israelites, and he tries to hire Balaam, who is in touch with the Lord, and he tries to curse them. He hires Balaam to curse against the Israelites, and Balaam, who is in touch with the Lord, he knows that there's nothing I can do about it, and he somehow manages to pay him and bribe him, and prophesy against them, and then every time, the Lord clearly still tells Balaam to leave them alone. Just you're only gonna say what I'm gonna say, and every time he tries to curse them, Balak tries to attempts to curse them. Balaam would only prophesy good things for them, and it's always a blessing. Then it says in verse chapter 24, the last verse. Then Balaam arose and departed, and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. So there's nothing was done. So then immediately you see then chapter 25 how while Israel remained in Shittim, the people began to play harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited people to the sacrifices of their God, and people ate and bowed down to their gods. And the Lord was angry against them. And it says that in few chapters later, what Balaam actually did, he chapter 31 verse 16, behold, these caused sons of Israel through the counsel of Balaam. So finally he said, I cannot do anything. They are almost invincible because they are on the Lord's side. But what you could do is, send some of these women, and then they will lead these people away from the Lord, and that's how you can defeat them. And the Lord, they'll basically turn them against their own Lord, and that's what it did. So, we can hear also in Revelation chapter 2:14 how Balaam's advice to draw people away from the Lord towards idolatry and immorality. And I see the same how we are invincible against, when we are on the Lord's side, we are always invincible. And the devil always, its goal is, there's nothing I can do to this guy. There's, like even while we are reading in Job, we saw how devil could do nothing without the Lord's permission, and it's totally powerless. But like how it attempted, the Balaam tried, finally gave the advice, they turn them against their own Lord by sending these women and lead them to idolatry and worship the idols, and that's how we can. And we see that in our own lives in the world, we, especially men, we see the agents of the devil everywhere, knowingly or unknowingly. How they are trying to draw us away from the Lord, through the advertisements or through websites or whatever ads, the schemes of the devil, especially when we are weak in some area, the devil can take advantage of that. And that's what I saw, that to take when we are sober and when we are not sleeping, we can be aware of the schemes of the devil and what it is what is it targeting, and we are not unaware of, like Paul says, we are not unaware of the schemes of the devil. And 2 Corinthians 11:3, but I'm afraid that as serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. And the goal of the devil is not to lead us away from the Lord's and or hurt us through, give us some sickness or lose some money here and there, but its ultimate goal is to lead us away from the Christ, the simple pure devotion from Christ. And that is its goal. And if I'm sober, if I'm not sleeping in the world, then I can take those warnings seriously. Even what we heard this morning, the devil can come and steal it away from us. And its goal is to, like we hear in Luke 10, the goal of the devil, John 10 actually, the goal of the devil is to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what its goal is. And I just have I was thinking about that, how the goal, the Lord loves us so much. He has so many promises, wonderful promises He has given to us. He has given us a church, and but nothing is going to be helpful, if I'm not sober in mind and I'm not guarding myself, especially in this area of simple, pure devotion to the Lord. And that would be the beginning. And But the goal of the devil is to hit that, he draws away. Hey, there's nothing wrong in that. All these men in Israelite men, I don't know what they were doing, but how they were led by this woman. They thought it was nothing sinful, nothing. So that's where it started, and then slowly these women led them away from the Lord, and then these men tried to impress this woman, and then they started worshiping idols and completely drawn until Eleazar's son Phinehas. It says that the Phinehas, son of Eleazar, took a spear, and he was so radical in judging this sin, and that the Lord was. It says that the zeal of the Lord, the zeal of Phinehas, it was like my zeal, and I just challenged me, to take some of these things seriously, and to be not to be unaware of the schemes of the devil, that we'll preserve ourselves from that simple pure devotion for the Lord. May the Lord help us. Amen.